This is a production of the Ultimate Homeschool Radio Network.
Well, hello everybody. I'm Hal.
And I'm Melanie.
And we are coming to you from our own personal little lockdown here in our Corona Chronicles Chapter 1.
Wow, yeah.
And thankfully not the hotbed. My mother lives in one of the hotbeds, but...
Well, it's interesting though, Hal, because in a way, this has changed everything for us. Because normally we're on the road this time of year. We're traveling to conferences and we're speaking to thousands of people. Conferences are canceled. And that's really weird.
Or some rescheduled. Let's say that.
It is very strange to be here in the springtime.
That is true. That's a huge,
I am loving that part.
That is a big, tremendous change. But in another way,
I am loving seeing the azaleas.
But in another way, this is not changing much on our day-to-day life.
Now, this is more like our fall day-to-day life.
Yeah, it is. Well, I tell you what it was like. I was going to the post office the other day, and there was like kids playing in the street, like parents playing catch in the middle of the road. They don't do that in our neighborhood. And, people out on tandem bicycles, and it looked, honest to goodness, it looked like a snow day. Dad can't go to work. Kids are out of school. We're just going to play for a while. That's what it really looked like, except it's green spring, and spring, and the flowers are blooming and all the rest of it. It's like really weird. And those of us who work from home all the time sometimes are saying, come on folks, I got to get to the post office to get out of the street. We're sounding like old duds, but honest to goodness, the
work has to happen.
The work has to happen.
The work has to happen. And we've been working at home, I don't know if you thought about this, for 15 years.
That long?
Yes.
Wow. I hadn't done that math. Has it been that long?
I think it's been that long.
Well, we did
almost 15 years.
We did have a period of working from home on other things before we got into this ministry, which is now 10 years old. Wow.
Yes.
But
over 10 years old.
Over 10 years, yes.
And
however,
we're kind of old hands at the working from home and homeschooling and balancing all that stuff.
So that's what I think might be helpful. It's interesting because when they canceled the schools, a lot of people in the homeschooling community were saying, yay, we're all homeschoolers now. And, oddly enough, in the homeschooling community, there's always been an undercurrent of people saying, boy, I just wish I could go home. I just wish that my husband could come home to work and we could work from home together. And, oh, gosh, for a lot of people, suddenly dad gets to come home too. And that's a big change within the homeschooling community.
Well, it sounds great. But it's a huge adjustment. I remember the first fall that you worked from home.
Do you then?
I do. I hated it.
Why did you hate it, my love?
I wanted to love it because you're my best friend and I love not being separated from you. But I've been used to being in charge all day. And I drove the schedule while you were gone, and I took care of the kids' school, and all of a sudden I felt very torn. It's like I didn't know how to accommodate what you were trying to do. I didn't know how much to change our schedule, if I should still be managing everything. Yeah. It was a struggle.
I remember, what it reminded me of?
What?
When we were first married, I was in the military, and at the end of the month, the retirees checks went out. And so the first week of the month, the commissary, which was the base grocery store, the commissary would fill up with retirees. And the naval base near us was really small. So most of the naval people would drive over to the other side of the peninsula and they'd shop at the Air Force commissary. And you'd see these retired Navy guys and their wives, and the wife is shopping and she's got her teeth clenched. And her husband, the retired captain or the retired petty officer or whatever, is shambling along behind her, making comments or, looking over her shoulder. And she's feeling like, this is my job. You are supposed to be out there driving ships. You're done with that, but leave me alone to do my job. And I could see there was tension just of going to the grocery store as a married couple after so many years of sea duty separating them.
Well, I want to say, though, that although I hated it at first, just it was awkward. It was hard. I didn't know how to manage.
Yeah.
I've loved it ever since.
Thank you.
And I wouldn't trade with anybody. I love working with you. It's a blast.
Yes.
It's just that the adjustment was difficult, and now we've got a whole world trying to make this adjustment. And
all at once.
All at once, all of a sudden, you've got your kids at home and your husband at home, and or your wife at home, and no one knows quite how to manage it. So I thought it might be helpful if we talked about how do you actually get those children taught?
Mm-hmm.
How do you actually get the work done? Mm-hmm. And how do you end up speaking to each other at the end of it?
Well, first off, let's just say it. Let's breathe a word of thanks for those of us who are homeschooling, that we don't have to figure out how to teach our kids at home at the same time. Oh boy,
I'm serious.
Because that's something we've been doing for a while. We should kind of have an idea of how that's supposed to work anyway.
Yeah, that's tough. But if you're in that place, don't worry though, it can be done.
It can be done. God gives the grace.
I do want to say this though. It is a lot easier to homeschool when you're the one making all the decisions. See, right now, if you're suddenly homeschooling because the school has sent your child home and there's online classes or there's assignments and things you're supposed to do, that's kind of the hardest way to start out homeschooling because you don't have any choice in the matter. Right. You can't control your schedule. You can't choose the curriculum. And see, if a curriculum's not working for my child, I get rid of it and buy something new.
You just go get something different. Yeah.
And you don't have that freedom. And so don't judge homeschooling by this because you're tense, the kids are tense, you're following somebody else's schedule and somebody else's assignments. It's way easier than this when you're in charge.
Somebody said, and I thought this was pretty appropriate, they said, you need to understand that homeschooling is not the same as isolation schooling.
Yeah, because
normally homeschoolers are active. They're in the community. They're going on field trips. They're visiting around with people. They're not hiding in a hole somewhere, which is what we're all bunkered down right now.
That's what everybody's doing. And see, if you had made the decision to homeschool at a normal time, you would be taking a field trip tomorrow or a meeting with your co-op to do some special classes.
You'd be going to support group meetings. You'd be going to conferences.
You'd be going to volleyball practice.
Right.
Your kids and you would have more support and more encouragement, and you wouldn't be so stressed out about it. So don't judge homeschooling by this.
Right.
Now, there are some good things about this, though, because it kind of forces us all to stop looking outside of our family and outside the walls of our home and find out how we can manage together and how we can get along together. And that's a good thing, I think, Hal.
I think it is. And, what they said about some people are born to greatness and some have greatness thrust upon them. I think this has been thrust upon us. We've got our own adjustment going on because although we have been homeschooling since the dawn of time and we have been working from home together for many, many years, guess what? We have college students coming home and trying to do college work online at the same time that we're homeschooling and doing business and doing ministry here at the house.
And it's been a bit of an adjustment for us because some of our kids had been sick, and then so chores weren't getting done as well as usual. And we've got the adjustment of not being traveling this spring, so we're trying to do a lot of things online, like we're doing this online.
Yeah. Right.
Instead of in-person at conferences. It's an adjustment for us too. Let's talk for a minute about how do you make sure that school actually gets done.
Okay.
I think the first thing you need to do is recognize that when there's an utter crisis or there's people sick, you might need to back down a little bit. It's okay to say, you know what, we're not going to do that problem set, or we're going to do every other problem set, or maybe we're not going to do that written. Let's just do it orally. Or maybe let's take a week or two off and just get some extra sleep and recoup and watch some educational videos or play some games, because stress takes its own toll.
And you're not able to concentrate the same. You're not going to be as productive.
How do I expect my kids to?
Right, exactly. And that's an important thing because, what does it say in Psalm 128, I believe, or 127, where it says that it's vain to rise up early and to to stay up late and to eat the bread of painful toil because God gives to his beloved even in their sleep. I mean, there's a normal cycle, and if we are fatigued, we're not productive. We're not going to be learning. We're not going to be able to keep on a good emotional keel with each other. And so sometimes it is good to say, you know what,
Sometimes you need to just
we need
back off a
we need
little
a break.
bit.
We need to go to bed early. We need to take a day off. We need to catch our breath.
We need to have a day of game school or video school. We need to relax. We need to recoup.
Yeah,
That's okay. It's all right.
it's
Okay.
real. It's real. Give yourself the grace to
And
do
you'll
that.
learn more later for having taken the break.
Right.
Now, let's say,
Right,
though,
right.
it's time to buckle down. It's time to get some schoolwork done. This is super hard, especially with so much going on.
Right.
You really need to map out 2 to 3 hours at least a day
Mm-hmm.
that you're focusing on schoolwork and you're not doing a bunch of other stuff. And that means for me,
Mm-hmm.
I have to stay off the internet. I can't check social media. I can't check email. I can't answer my phone because if I do, I've got business interest out there and I Zoom, I'm gone. Or ministry interest. Someone asks me a question and it seems oh so urgent and I've got to deal with it. But the problem is that it could have waited a couple of hours and we would have gotten school done.
That's the trap of loving what you do.
It really is.
You know, if you love your work, it's not laborious to do, to do the work. You like engaging your work.
Yeah, I do. I love what we do.
And you do have to recognize sometimes your duty is not that particular part of your work, but the other thing that you need to
And
be
sometimes
doing.
it's just not as fun or feels as immediately rewarding. You know, if I answer somebody's question online and they go, oh, thank you so much, you're so wise. You know, my kids aren't going to do that when I help them with math.
They just expect it.
Yeah, of course.
Of course she's wise. Yeah, she knows everything.
Of course
right?
she's going to help me with math.
Right.
And so you got to carve out some time that is really, I'm helping my kids with school.
Mm-hmm.
Now, it doesn't look like traditional school where I'm not lecturing, but everybody's working. I've got my eyes on them so they haven't wandered off.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm calling up different kids to help them with different parts of their work.
It's the one-room schoolhouse model.
Yeah.
If you don't know what that looks like, go reread. Was it Little Town no, where was it?
That was
on the Shores of Silver Lake.
Was
that? At any rate, one of the later books in Laura Ingalls Wilder's Little House on the Prairie series.
Just
one
read
of the
the whole series.
We'll read the
kids,
whole series.
Okay.
That's a great thing to do while you're on shutdown. Yeah.
We'll put a link in the show notes. Okay. But so listen. Don't feel like it has to be super formal, but do put away the distractions. It'll be so much easier if you do. If you put everything else away for 2 or 3 hours, you'll accomplish so much with school that you'll be able to concentrate on work later. And give your kids what they need to be independent. So give them a list each day of what they have to accomplish to say school's done.
And that list may be a daily list for your younger ones. It may be a weekly list for your high schoolers.
And I'm bad at this. I know better, and I fall out of the habit. And when I fall out of the habits, less and less and less school gets done until I say, "What in the world?" And to my teens, I say, "Make me a plan and show me your plan for getting this done."
I think it's important. A lot of times we know, so often we know better than we actually accomplish, and so it's important to say, you know what? If I stumble, I just get up and I start over.
Yeah.
I just begin again. And that's important because it's easy to say, well, I've blown it. That's just no good. And that that's an important thing in this time of upheaval. It's important to keep yourself out of the ditch. Not to get depressed, not to get discouraged, just to say, hey, everything is topsy-turvy right now. And if this doesn't work right now, we'll put it down and maybe pick it up again later. Or maybe we just start over again, or we'll try it a little differently. Just keep moving forward. Don't let yourself say, oh, full stop.
And make chores a part of your regular day. We have certain chore times. Get chores done before breakfast.
Right.
Before lunch, after lunch, before dinner, after dinner, because that way I can know everybody's working and doing what they're supposed to do. And everything works better if we're all doing our chores.
Truth.
I think that's part of it. I think to recognize that your middle schoolers and your youngest kids are going to need a lot of supervision. They're not going to be able to work on their own. Now, upper elementary and high school can often work on their own and love working on their own.
In
But
fact, I would say over the course of a student's life, the beginners need a lot of hands-on.
yeah,
The middle schoolers need a lot of encouragement and help, and the seniors are going to
yeah,
take a lot of attention. They can do a lot on their own, but they're going to need a lot of counseling and a lot of encouragement of a different sort. So,
yeah, particularly in the fall of senior year.
so you got 2 big blocks of time in between those milestones,
That kids can work a lot on their own
and should.
should.
Yeah.
And that's not neglecting their education. In fact, it's setting them free. You know, our kids have all said when they went away to college, Mom, thank you so much for teaching me to manage my own learning, because professors don't spoon feed it to you. And a lot of my friends are drowning because they've never had to manage their own education, but you made us do that. Thanks. Now, your 11-year-old will not say that.
I've got a friend who's a professor at a college that will remain nameless, and he was just posting on social media this evening saying, I've got a whole class full of students who apparently expect me to do their homework for them. I mean, that struggle is real. So,
well, one of our sons showed up to one of his college classes online, and he was one of 2 students there. You know, a lot of kids have not learned that it's their responsibility to get up, show up, do the work. And you're doing your kids a great favor if you teach them to do that. Get them up on time, but tell them, okay, what's your plan for getting it done today?
Right.
Show me your plan. Let's work it through. And then ask them later, hey, show me your plan. Did you get all this done? Wow, sorry, you're going to have to work on it this afternoon.
Yeah.
And realize, too, that they're going to be able to do their schoolwork a lot faster than they are in an institutional setting, because they don't have standing in line and changing classes and taking attendance and listening to it being explained 57 times.
Well, that's like one of the dividends that you get when you start working from home, whatever the circumstances, is that, you probably spent a couple hours a day driving back and forth between the home and the office, or between the home and the plant, or whatever. You spent a couple hours in the car. You might have spent an extra hour and a half in the morning, getting everything ready and professional and all the rest. And when you say, you know what, my morning commute is, I put on my blue jeans and I walk downstairs to the desk in the den, total time 10 minutes. You've regained a lot of time and energy.
You've regained just about enough time to teach your kids.
Well,
okay, seriously. So let's think about this. Let's use that time and use it to bless our kids. Now, we need to talk about how do we get work done?
Well, there's a bunch of things that go into that.
Before we do that, let me say this, okay?
Okay.
One great way to keep your teens entertained is Craftsman Crate. It's our subscription box.
Yes.
And you can find it at craftsmancrate.com. It teaches your teens hands-on artisanal crafts, things that their grandfathers might have done, things that might end up being their hobbies the rest of their lives. And it comes with everything you need. And it's not junk, it's real tools, real supplies.
No, and for your 12 years old and up, it's pretty much self-directing. Okay.
Yes.
You don't have to be an artist, you don't have to be a craftsman to teach it. It's something where the instructions are clear. And guess what? We test it out because our teenagers are the ones who develop a lot of the kits and even a lot of the projects that are in those boxes.
And it's something you guys will love too. So check out craftsmancrate.com. Now let's talk about getting the work done. Sometimes that's a little bit even harder than that. Do you remember the time we were doing a session like this?
Yes.
Broadcasting from home with a large audience.
It was live.
It was live.
I remember. Yes.
And all of a sudden, one of our toddlers ran down the hall, and this huge
it was a floor lamp.
Floor lamp went bam right across the keyboard in front of us.
Just like the headsman's axe, boom, and there's a cloud of dust and everything.
That gave me a heart attack. Hal.
No damage, thankfully, but it was real. Well, that same toddler had a way of, climbing up from below and looking up into the camera to see what was on the screen and all. And
we've been interrupted numerous times. I remember just the other day, I was on the phone with a big corporation, trying to develop a wholesale relationship with them, right?
You're right.
And so, I'm trying to give them our tax ID number and convince them that we're a
business stuff,
real business, right?
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, somebody runs in the room, and I think what they said was,
"Yes,
Mama, can you get such and such out of the bathroom? He's been sitting there on the toilet for ages.
Did you see? Yeah. Well, you know what? I think we've seen the videos going around of people that photobomb their professional media figure family member. Did you see the woman that was doing a video conference and her husband walked through in his underwear? Did you see that? And then ran into the wall when he was trying to get away, and it was just really awkward.
These things happen.
They do happen, and guess what?
They're happening to all of us right now.
They're happening. Look,
it's not just us anymore.
It was live on the BBC when somebody's toddler ran in the room and interrupted an international analyst broadcast to the British Broadcasting Company. So
I don't think that kid had on pants either.
Still in diapers.
Yeah.
But okay.
It happens.
So everybody.
But the work has to get done.
But work does need to get done in some fashion.
I think one thing that's important is to make it clear when you are working, because computer can be our entertainment. We can be noodling around reading all the news, or we can be doing very serious work that doesn't need to be interrupted.
And there's different ways you can do it. Now, I had a friend who ran a company from an office in the front of his house. And let me tell you, this guy was organized, and he had like a little stoplight type of thing that hung on the door. And so if there was a green light, you could come in and talk. Dad's free. If there's a yellow, you could come in, but you got to be quiet because Dad's on the phone or something. Red light, do not open the door. And so that's how he did it. Now I've heard of people.
Well, you could do that with just circles of paper,
or Post-it notes,
or whatever. And that's great if you have a private place that you can go. But if you've got two of you working from home and kids everywhere, for us, getting in a separate room wasn't possible.
There's a couple of things, it's something that you have to, I think the more that you bring the family into the endeavor, the easier it is to make some of these things work. So like, for example, we typically don't try to lock down the house and get everybody graveyard quiet unless we've got a call or unless we're recording. And you know what we do? I mean, we'll just lean back and we'll shout, "Business call," before we answer the phone. Everybody knows, gotta be quiet. They're on the phone. And to be polite, it's always nice to say, "I'm done," when you're done. But something like that, yeah, sometimes you're going to need it to be quiet for a few minutes because you're inviting other people electronically into your home, and you don't want them to be distracted by the children fighting or the dogs, whatever. But that kind of thing, that kind of signaling.
Well, yeah, that really helps. Something that helps me is putting some earbuds in, and that helps me concentrate.
Just isolating yourself.
Just isolating myself so that it drowns out, because I find it very hard to ignore what the children are doing. Now, be careful about that, though, because sometimes you would do better to let yourself be interrupted for a moment than wait till they have a giant explosion and fight and you're interrupted for 45 minutes. And so I found if kids walk by and they say, "Mom, if I can, it's best for me," instead of saying, "I'm busy," instead to say, "Take your earbuds out. What can I do for you, honey?" And deal with it. Often it just takes a sentence or two. But if I keep saying, I'm busy, then pretty soon it's screaming and hollering and having to break it up.
Or else they don't stop to share things with you because you're always too busy to hear them.
And you really don't want that.
We had a period of trying to get a business started before the present one, and I was pretty discouraged with it. It wasn't taking off quickly. We were really struggling financially. And I was sitting there at the kitchen table, which was my desk at the moment. I was sitting at the kitchen table working on some sort of sales pitch or something. And my high school age son, my oldest son, just kind of drifted through the kitchen and stopped and said, "Dad, I just wanted to say, these last 2 years that you've been here at home, those have been the best 2 years of my childhood. And I'm so glad that you were here, that, we can talk to you at any time if we've got a problem or if we've got a question, that you're here to help. And I'm just so glad that you started this business before I graduated and went away to college." And then he drifted away. And I'm thinking, wow, I really needed to hear that today, because what your kids are perceiving is very different than, especially if you are dealing with maybe your job has closed out and you're kind of technically unemployed right now and feeling very under the gun to provide for your family and to identify, we guys tend to get so much of our identity from the words on the bottom of our business card, and that really is not a good place for a Christian to be, but it is a reality. And we need to remember that our family is seeing something different than the disappointment in my career path. That's not what
or
they're
how will we
focusing.
make it without conferences this spring or whatever.
Yeah.
Our kids may be saying, wow, I get to spend time with mom and dad. In fact, y'all, this may be some of the happiest memories of your children's childhood, is all of you together for the next few weeks. And
Well,
that's kind of weird to think about.
Yeah.
But our kids have said things like that.
You were sharing that with somebody the other day, that we had a time between jobs during another economic downturn, and we did the old beans and rice thing quite frequently because we were really strapped. And after another job landed and we're making good money again, and start to breathe a little more easily, the kids were kind of badgering us, saying, why don't we ever have beans and rice? That was so good, and we really enjoyed having the cornbread. And you think, they didn't see it as we're poverty stricken. They just saw it as, oh, that's something neat that our family does together, and I have fond memories of it.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay, so give yourself room to accept that level of acceptance from your children. You will find it blesses you as well as it blesses them.
And something I have found is that when I keep my priorities straight, Hal, when I put my relationship with the Lord and you and my kids first, that the Lord blesses the business. That when I get my priorities messed up and I'm focusing too much on the business, I'm telling my kids, no. The Lord does things to shake me up. And so I would encourage you, you got to get your business done, but do it. Remember that these are unusual and precious moments with your family.
And, I think that's an important thing too. I had a chance to talk with a lot of men who were in support group leadership at a leadership conference recently in Virginia. And one thing that impressed me about that group is, as we went around introducing ourselves, almost nobody mentioned their daytime work.
It's very unusual.
Almost all of them
guys,
said, almost all of the guys led off by, I've been married for 25 years and I've got 4 kids. We've been homeschooling. They were in elementary school. It was all focusing on that family part. And so I was really pleased to see that and think, that's something that we need to be very aware of.
Well, before we wrap, because I'm going to wrap up just a second, it's all right to work at different times sometimes. It might help get up early or get late if you have that you have to leave. That doesn't mean we work writing books.
Right.
But make sure that get your priorities straight and that you let your kids know why you're doing what you're doing. I'm sorry, I know I'm home, and normally when I'm home we can play, but I've got to get this much done because that's what brings in the money that pays for our house and pays for our food. But after this is done, I'll call you.
And be sure you do.
And be sure you do.
Do it.
And then play a game with them. Instead of getting over the long commute by staring at the screen or something, pull out a board game and play with your kids. Get down on the floor and wrestle with them. Sing a song, pop some corn, watch a movie together. Because there's a lot of anxiety out there right now.
And that's real.
And it's real. And our kids feel it. But we can make this a good time for them. We can make it a time that will make our families stronger, not weaker.
You've been listening to Making Biblical Family Life Practical with Hal and Melanie Young. If you found this program interesting, challenging, and encouraging, why not join us on the web at halandmelanie.com. That's HALANDMELANIE.com. Or follow us on social media. You can find us on Facebook at Facebook/Hal and Melanie or Facebook.com/Raising Real Men. This program is a production of the Ultimate Homeschool Radio Network. Join us next week when we'll be back to talk about making biblical family life practical. Until then, thank you and God bless you for listening.